20 years. That's how long Julian and I had known each other. Our lives were intertwined like ivy, familiar and seemingly inseparable. The first night after signing the lease to share his apartment felt strangely significant. I'd bought a huge watermelon on the way home. A peace offering of sorts, a symbol of shared summer days. But when the door opened, it wasn't Julian standing there. It was a woman I didn't recognize, her expression a mixture of polite confusion and curiosity. And behind her, emerging from the bathroom, drying his hands on a towel, was Julian. He caught my eye and gave me a quick, almost imperceptible raise of his eyebrows. I froze for a second, the heavy watermelon suddenly feeling like an anchor. Then, improvising wildly, I hoisted it up. "Delivery," I announced, trying to sound cheerful and detached. "Your watermelon's here." There was a small public garden tucked away near the apartment building. Deflated, I carried the watermelon to the little pavilion at the entrance and sat down on a cool stone bench. Across from me, a couple who had been wrapped around each other seemed unnerved by my sudden, melon-accompanied presence and quickly untangled themselves, wandering off into the twilight. Now it was just me and the watermelon. I stared at the entrance of Julian's building, feeding the relentless mosquitoes for what felt like an eternity. Nearly 20 minutes by the park clock, before the woman I'd seen earlier finally emerged. Julian followed close behind her. He was tall and she was petite, almost bird-like beside him. From my vantage point, the difference in their heights created the optical illusion of an embrace, as they paused under the dim yellow glow of the entryway light. As the light caught her profile, recognition clicked. Claire. That was her name, wasn't it? Claire. Jean. No, the surname escaped me. I just remembered she'd been a persistent admirer of Julian back in college, trailing after him with open adoration for ages. I hadn't realized they were still in touch after all these years, and apparently close enough for her to be visiting his apartment. "She's gone, you can stop staring now." A warm breath tickled my ear. I jumped, swatting defensively as Julian leaned in close. "Your social life seems to be thriving," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Why didn't you let her stay longer?" "Didn't want my delivery girl stealing my watermelon," he countered, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Hold on," I retorted. "This isn't your melon." 20 minutes ago, when I played the delivery charade, he hadn't played along. He'd simply looked baffled and said, "I didn't order a watermelon. Are you sure you have the right apartment?" So much for friendship when a pretty face was involved. He chuckled, a low familiar sound. All right. My bad for being a jerk. But you ran off so fast." "I was trying to give you space," I protested, perhaps a little too loudly. "Didn't want you blaming me later for ruining your romantic prospects, like you always do." He just made a dismissive tisk sound. The pavilion itself was unlit. In the deepening shadows, Julian was mostly a silhouette, but the silver pinky ring he always wore caught a stray beam of light, flashing briefly. He casually stuffed one hand in his pocket and used the other to hoist the watermelon off the bench. "Come on," he said. "Planning to become a mosquito buffet out here?" His long legs covered the ground quickly. I had to practically skip to keep up, my curiosity overriding my earlier pique. "Was that the girl from college? The one who chased you?" Julian glanced down at me. "Sharp memory, Eleanor. So? Is something happening there?" Maybe my eagerness was too obvious. Julian, predictably, decided to dangle the answer just out of reach. "What do you think?" And then he clammed up, offering no further explanation. Later that night, back in the apartment, I cut the watermelon. Half we attacked with spoons, digging out the sweet, red flesh. The other half went into the fridge for later. I closed the refrigerator door. I turned just in time to see Julian expertly scoop out the very heart of the melon, the sweetest, seedless part, and pop it into his mouth. "Julian!" I yelled, outraged. The spoonful was so large it puffed out his cheek. He covered his mouth, mumbling incoherently, but his eyes were crinkled in that infuriatingly smug smile I knew so well. "What? I'm your landlord now. Can't I even have a bite of your watermelon?" His expression, his tone. It was exactly the same bratty charm he'd wielded since we were kids. Utterly punchable. Julian and I met when we were small children. I still vividly remember the day his mother, Mrs. Ashworth, brought him over. He was dressed in a ridiculously formal little suit, with a bow tie, polished brown shoes, and crisp white mid-calf socks. His face was set in a stern, unchildlike expression, as if an old soul had been crammed into a tiny body. Kids are often drawn to perceived strength or perhaps just difference. The more aloof he seemed, the more determined I was to crack his shell. Initially, he wanted nothing to do with me. But I was persistent, armed with a relentlessly sunny disposition and an endless supply of candy, specifically orange-flavored ones, his secret weakness. A secret I accidentally let slip in 10th grade, causing a temporary orange candy shortage at the school store. Once I finally got past his carefully constructed facade, I discovered the real Julian. Nobody knew him like I did. He was vain, prone to bragging, a ridiculously picky eater, obsessed with appearances, and strangest of all, he kept a diary. Seriously, who still kept a diary? Unfortunately, he also possessed a formidable arsenal of my own embarrassing childhood stories, so his list of character flaws remained our secret. In middle school, Julian hadn't hit his growth spurt yet and coasted on his cute, boyish looks, attracting a gaggle of older girls. High school changed everything. He shot up like a bamboo stalk in spring, his features sharpening into something undeniably handsome. His fan club exploded. Girls seemed to materialize wherever he went. But he had this mantra: the better looking you are, the more you need to protect yourself. So throughout his entire school career, Julian Ashworth, heartthrob extraordinaire, never actually dated anyone. I was never popular like him. I was the perennial tomboy, my hair rarely growing past my shoulders. My one and only brush with romance was a chubby kid in elementary school who mistakenly believed my parents owned a convenience store and thought befriending me meant unlimited snacks. Consequently, my self-preservation instincts weren't as finely honed as Julian's. In high school, I developed a secret crush on an older student, a senior on a different team. I started religiously attending Julian's basketball practices, using him as an excuse to sit in the stands and watch my crush sweatily exert himself on another court. I never told Julian, of course. He would have mocked me mercilessly. But it didn't take long for him to figure it out. It happened one afternoon. I was trying to discreetly snap a photo of the senior with my phone when Julian suddenly appeared beside me, grinning. "Let Daddy see how good you made me look," he teased, snatching the phone from my hand. I stared at him, utterly bewildered. In the span of a single second, a kaleidoscope of emotions flickered across Julian's face. Amusement turned to confusion, then hardened into a distinct displeasure. He glared at me, his voice sharp. "You weren't taking a picture of me?" A wave of guilt washed over me. I reached for the phone, but he lifted it out of reach. "Well, I never said I was." I mumbled weakly. His face was stony. "So, all these days you've been supporting my practice were actually about watching him play basketball?" He glanced back at the phone screen, confirming the identity of my photographic subject. "Not entirely," I tried to backtrack. "So basically, yes." He let out a cold little laugh, deleted the photo with a decisive swipe of his thumb, and handed the phone back. Then, without another word, he turned and walked off the court, leaving me stunned. My first instinct was to check the recently deleted folder to recover the picture. But as the confirmation prompt appeared, I hesitated, thinking back to the look on Julian's face as he walked away. He'd seemed genuinely angry. In all our years of bickering and teasing, he rarely got truly upset with me like that. I reasoned it out. He was incredibly proud, maybe even a little vain, discovering I was using his practice as a cover to admire. Someone else probably wounded his ego. Plus, we were supposed to be best friends. Hiding something like this from him wasn't right. Love might be valuable, but friendship felt weightier. Having constructed a suitable justification, I went over to his house that evening. Mrs. Ashworth wasn't home. He was alone. I knew where they kept the spare key, under the loose garden gnome. A habit born from years of casually dropping by. I let myself in, calling his name as I headed towards his room. His bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open as I called his name again. Simultaneously, Julian slammed his laptop shut, or rather minimized whatever window he had open with lightning speed. It happened too fast for me to register what was on the screen. He shot up from his chair, sending it rolling backward on its wheels. We stared at each other for a tense second, then two. The breath I just let out hitched in my throat again. "Eleanor, why don't you ever knock?" he demanded, his voice tight. I stood rooted to the spot, bewildered by his over-the-top reaction. "You didn't hear me call?" In truth, I probably had forgotten to knock, too focused on making amends. I hadn't even closed the front door properly behind me. He ran a hand through his hair distractedly. What did you see? I had to laugh despite the tension. Just writing in your diary, right? What's so embarrassing about that? I knew about his journaling habit, the evolution from locked notebooks to password-protected files. I mean, did you see the content? He pressed, his eyes narrowed. Dude, the font is tiny and I was standing way back here. How could I see anything? Then a sudden realization dawned. Wait a second. You're acting so weird about it. Are you writing something you shouldn't be? Julian fell silent, his jaw tight. Finally, he ground out. It's something you can't see. Why not? It's not like I'm a stranger. Just drop it, okay? Is it a love letter? My curiosity flared. Then you definitely should let me see. I can give you pointers. His expression shifted again, hardening into a sudden coolness. Like I need advice from someone who's never even had a real date, he sneered. Takes one to know one, I shot back, equally stung. Damn it. His jab didn't really hurt. We traded insults like currency, but it confirmed one thing. Julian actually had someone he liked. Suddenly, I didn't want to pursue that topic anymore. I sat down on the edge of his bed, waiting. He remained standing, fidgeting. After a moment of silence, I took the initiative. About the senior. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure if it even counted as liking him. Julian looked at me intently, the earlier irritation softening in his features. He finally sat down heavily in his chair, his fingers flexing and uncurling. The chair slid forward, his knee bumping mine. And now? Are you sure? Yeah. Like him or don't like him? Doesn't really matter, I said honestly, because I'd never truly experienced it. I didn't know what real romantic love felt like. But I knew. Deep down it wasn't this lukewarm, indifferent feeling I had about the senior. In the grand scheme of things, Julian was far more important. Julian studied my face for a long moment, then a slow smile spread across his lips. You came all the way over here just to tell me that? There was a hint of smugness in his smile that irked me. No, I retorted pettily. I came to read your diary. His face fell instantly. The moment my hand reached for his mouse, he yanked the laptop's power cord from the wall. The screen went black. Why are you being so stingy? I demanded. Because I am stingy, he shot back. Are you incapable of writing your own diary, you leech? Stop trying to mooch off mine. All these years later, I wondered if Julian still kept that diary. After a surprisingly peaceful night's sleep, I woke to find Julian already gone. He'd left breakfast on the table. Congee and soy milk. The soy milk was cool, but the congee was still perfectly warm. I ate slowly, texting him to ask if he'd be back for lunch. No reply. He was probably swamped. Julian worked as an agent for a major sports brand. Recently, the city had launched a massive public fitness initiative, and he was managing a significant part of it. His schedule was packed. Unlike me, since quitting my stable, soul-crushing job in government inspection, I felt like a drifting boat. The frantic studying and exams of the past were replaced by an unnerving amount of free time. Finding a new job was essential. I'd sent out resumes, but before any potential employer could respond, my mother called. After the usual lengthy catch-up, she delivered her customary pep talk. Work hard, stay focused, Eleanor. Gold always shines eventually. She still didn't know I'd quit. I'd taken the government job largely because my family expected it. After a year of quiet misery, I couldn't take it anymore. But telling them felt like admitting failure, so I resigned in secret. With no income, my previous lease had expired. Going home wasn't really an option. My return under these circumstances wouldn't be met with enthusiasm, which made Julian, now a homeowner, suddenly invaluable. I remembered calling him that night, needing to ask the favor. My voice trembled slightly over the phone as I hesitantly asked where he was. Home, he'd replied simply. Feel like grabbing a drink? I'd asked. Too lazy to go out, he'd said. Just come over here. Julian never missed an opportunity to gain the upper hand. When I arrived at his place, I cut straight to the chase. Could I possibly crash with him for a while? He'd smirked, that familiar, infuriating glint in his eyes. Only if you can beat me. Knowing I needed something from him, he relished the chance to torment me. But I wasn't one to back down easily either. We played everything that night: cards, video games, stupid drinking games. He won some, I won some. It was neck and neck. Fueled by alcohol. We traded truths along with playful insults, dredging up embarrassing stories from our shared past, until neither of us had any dignity left. By the end, his liquor cabinet was significantly depleted. I was sprawled on the rug, my head leaning back against the sofa, a strange melancholy washing over me. "Julian," I slurred slightly. "Why do we have to grow up?" He was close, sitting beside me on the floor. His reply was a warm puff of alcohol-scented breath against my neck. "What's wrong with growing up? For me, it means I can do a lot of things I couldn't before." "Like what?" "Like..." He tilted his head, looking at me, then blew a playful raspberry near my ear. "Drinking." I waved my hand, trying to dispel the fumes, pouting. "But work sucks." "Then quit, dummy," he said easily. "If things get rough, I'll support you." "You'll support me?" I scoffed. "That's just talk. The minute you find someone you actually like, promises like that disappear." His gaze sharpened. "How do you know I don't like someone right now?" "Oh." I fell silent. "Why aren't you saying anything?" He pressed gently. "I don't know what to say." His voice dropped lower, serious now. "Hearing me say that, does it hurt?" I looked down, twisting the fabric of my shirt. "A little," I admitted quietly. "Eleanor." "Look up." My head was swimming fuzzy with whiskey bubbles. Obediently, I lifted my chin just an inch, and my lips brushed against his cheek. I looked into Julian's eyes. They were startlingly bright, even beneath his thick lashes. In the space between our breaths, warm and close, I knew I was drunk. And Julian. As his lips found mine firmly this time, I figured he must be pretty drunk too. I woke up before dawn the next day, disoriented. The surroundings were both strange and achingly familiar. Julian's room. And the person lying beside me, breathing softly, was Julian. My body went rigid. I lay there for a long time, mind blank, before rational thought slowly seeped back in. Mechanically, I reached for my phone. On the nightstand. The sudden brightness made me squint, and I fumbled to lower the screen's intensity. Then my thumbs flew across the keyboard. What to do when you wake up after a blackout drunk night, having slept with your childhood best friend, who you absolutely cannot be with. The internet connection was infuriatingly slow. As the page struggled to load, the man beside me stirred, letting out a low groan. I instantly snapped the phone shut and pretended to be asleep, heart hammering against my ribs. "Don't pretend," Julian's voice rumbled, low and husky. "I know you're awake." Damn it. I remembered something from high school. Someone, a nosy classmate, maybe had asked Julian and me if we ever thought we might end up together someday. It was during the school's New Year's Eve party. I was involved in a play and my face was caked in heavy stage makeup. Julian was trying to clean it off with a makeup wipe, muttering curses under his breath because my skin was reacting badly. I'd waited until the end of the night to mention the itchy rash, and now red spots were blooming where the foundation had been. The person asking the question was from the school paper, holding a little notepad. I looked over, genuinely considering the question for the first time. Before I could answer, Julian made an impatient tisk sound and turned to the reporter, his voice dripping with annoyance. "Look at her," he said, gesturing towards my blotchy face. "She's a mess." "Who are you calling a mess?" I smacked his arm hard. He winced but turned back to me, his grip firm but gentle on my chin. "Hold still," he ordered, his brow still furrowed with impatience, but his touch was careful. He knew I was uncomfortable. I stopped squirming, letting him work, but my eyes darted around. I finally answered the reporter. "I've never really thought about it." "Well, think about it now," the reporter prompted. I tried to shake my head, but Julian's grip held me steady. "We're too close," I said finally. "We know each other too well. It would never work." The instant the words left my mouth, I felt a slight sting on my chin where he'd been cleaning. "What was that for?" I mumbled. Julian tossed the used wipe into a nearby bin, his eyes downcast. "Done," he announced curtly. Then he looked back at the reporter. "She said it's impossible. What are you still waiting for?" Famous last words. My younger self had been spectacularly naive. Look at me now. Epic faceplant. In the pre-dawn gloom, we stared at each other. For some reason, I was terrified of what Julian might say first. "Julian," I blurted out, "I blacked out last night. I don't remember anything." It was the coward's way out, the universal signal for let's pretend this never happened. He remained silent, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He pushed himself up, leaning back against the headboard, his eyes never leaving my face. "So," he said finally, his voice quiet but intense, "are you saying you don't want to acknowledge it? Or do you want me to help you remember?" Oh. My body remembered even if my mind claimed ignorance. The lingering warmth, the faint soreness. Something had definitely happened. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, nearly drowning out my own voice. Maybe let's not remember. It had all happened too fast. I was afraid to make the wrong choice, afraid that one wrong step would lead to irreversible regret. Friend or lover? It seemed blindingly obvious that friendship lasted longer. That morning Julian looked at me for a very, very long time. Long enough for the first hints of gray light to filter through the blinds. He reached over, snagged a cigarette from the pack on his nightstand, and lit it. Through a thin veil of smoke he finally spoke. "Pick a day this week. Move your stuff over." Huh. I was completely thrown. If the night before hadn't happened, his offer would have made me ecstatic. But now, everything was complicated. And I'd conveniently forgotten it all. What did his offer mean? Was he trying to sweep it under the rug just like I wanted? Or was this some kind of guilt-ridden, reluctant attempt to be with me? My hesitation lasted only a couple of seconds before Julian let out a short, humorless laugh. "You wanted to forget, right?" he said, his voice laced with irony. With that reaction, how am I supposed to just move on? After that night, Julian formally agreed to let me move into his spare room as a temporary solution, even promising to help cover for me with my parents. The actual moving process was surprisingly smooth. But standing outside his apartment door with the last box, I hesitated. Living together. Just the two of us. Sure, we'd known each other forever. We were practically family. We knew embarrassing secrets, childhood nicknames, even the location of each other's birthmarks. But things were different now. Irrevocably different. Julian didn't rush me. I stalled for a few days, wrestling with my own awkwardness. Finally, determined to break the tension, I splurged on that giant watermelon at the fancy grocery store downstairs, hoping a sweet offering could smooth over the weirdness that perhaps only I truly felt. And then of course Claire had been there. Claire Cheen. Julian had supplied the surname later. And apparently, her connection to Julian was more complex than just a college crush. Rumor had it they'd been close to getting together back then. Why didn't they? I had no idea. That period coincided with a time when Julian and I were barely speaking, caught in our own strange Cold War. But that's the thing about friendships like ours. Rooted so deep they're almost familial. Conflicts could arise out of nowhere and vanish just as mysteriously. We'd eventually drifted back together without ever dissecting the reasons for the rift. Julian came home later that evening while I was attempting to make shrimp stir-fry. He washed his hands at the kitchen sink, glancing skeptically at my wok. "Edible?" he asked. I brandished my spatula. "Don't eat it then." After drying his hands, he didn't leave the kitchen but leaned against the counter, watching me. "Any luck today?" Sent out 6 applications. Got 1 response, but I'm hesitating. "Why?" "The salary." "Money grubber," he scoffed. "Well, I can't live here forever, can I?" I retorted. Rent money had to be factored into any acceptable salary. Julian stared at the shrimp sizzling in the pan. "Wouldn't be the worst thing," he said quietly. I paused mid-stir. He added, "As long as you cook for me." I rolled my eyes. "What do I owe you now?" He fell silent then, looking at me with an unreadable expression. "Well," he said softly, "you planning on getting another freebie?" "Oh." Some things refuse to be ignored, no matter how hard you pretend they didn't happen. That night. It was mortifying. Julian bringing it up even teasingly made my toes curl. Thankfully, after that comment, he dropped the subject and didn't mention it again in the following days. I breathed a silent sigh of relief. In early September, I aced the final interview for the new job. Julian insisted on celebrating but ended up working late, caught in meetings. I waited up for him, eventually dozing off on the sofa. The sound of the front door opening roused me. Figuring it was Julian, I stumbled towards my bedroom door, intending to tell him there was leftover congee in the kitchen if he was hungry. I opened the door and was confronted by the sight of a walking, talking naked man. Okay, not entirely naked. He was wearing boxers. Sleep vanished instantly. We both yelped at the same time, a simultaneous shocked, "What the hell?" Julian reacted with his usual lightning speed, snatching the towel from around his neck and holding it defensively below his waist. What are you doing? Me? I hadn't done anything. Seeing his flustered state immediately gave me the upper hand. I planted my hands on my hips. What am I doing? What are you doing? Why are you using my bathroom instead of your own? And why are you wandering around half naked afterwards? The water pressure in mine is shot, he mumbled, looking flustered. The heater wasn't working. And this is my house. I can walk around naked if I want to. He clamped his jaw shut, amending. I wasn't wandering. I paused. Okay, fair points. My righteous indignation deflated slightly. Well, are you hungry? The abrupt change of subject seemed to catch him off guard. A little, he admitted. Oh. I clutched the doorknob. There's congee in the kitchen. Maybe. Put some pants on and go eat. Julian just stood there, towel still clutched strategically. I glared at him. He glared back. Well, go back in your room first. Oh. So protective of his modesty now. 10 minutes later, a soft knock sounded on my door. Julian. He said he'd heated up the congee. My mind was still stubbornly replaying images of his well-defined abs. It was hard to shake. Hearing his knock, I braced myself and went out. He'd already ladled a bowl for me. I wasn't particularly hungry but sat down and took a few bites, mostly for show. As we were finishing, Julian spoke abruptly. I meant to celebrate with you tonight. Got stuck in a last-minute meeting. Sorry. It's fine, I waved it off. You're busy. Besides, it's not official yet. When's the final confirmation? Day after tomorrow. You'll get it. He sounded confident. Returning the courtesy, I asked, are you going to be this busy for the rest of the month? Almost done. He glanced at my half-eaten bowl. Finished. Yeah. Gimme. Without thinking, I pushed the bowl towards him and watched, speechless, as he polished off my leftovers. He caught my stare. Hungry, he stated simply, wiping his mouth and letting out an unceremonious burp. I gave him a look of disgust. He just grinned. Day after tomorrow, he said. I have a competition. After your confirmation call, come watch. You're competing? Yeah, just filling a spot. In what? I assumed basketball. He shook his head. Swimming. The final confirmation call went perfectly. I got the job. Stepping out of the sleek office building, I checked the time, 3 p.m. Julian's race was at 3:40 p.m. I frantically hailed a cab. Despite urging the driver to hurry, weaving through afternoon traffic, I arrived late. The race was already over. The results were being displayed, and just as I entered the viewing area, the giant screen zoomed in on Julian's face. His skin was pale and slick with water, droplets clinging to his high cheekbones. The camera lingered for a moment before pulling back to show his whole body, lean muscle, broad shoulders. A wave of appreciative screams echoed through the venue. I completely missed seeing his rank. My mind snagged on a single thought. He was wearing significantly less now than he had been wandering around the apartment the other night, yet he seemed completely unbothered by hundreds of eyes on him. Where was the shy modesty then? Now he looked like some kind of aquatic god, calmly rinsing off under the showers visible on screen, the muscles in his arms tensing as he wrung out a towel. The sheer masculinity radiating from him felt almost tangible, practically leaping off the screen and hitting me square in the chest. My breathing hitched. A fragmented image flashed through my mind, strong arms braced on either side of me, a sense of overwhelming closeness. Suddenly I felt incredibly hot. I fumbled in my bag, finally locating the access pass he'd given me earlier. The backstage area was chaotic, filled with busy staff. Not wanting to bother anyone, I navigated the corridors myself, eventually finding the restrooms. I ducked inside to splash cool water on my face. When I came out and stood washing my hands at the sink, I sensed someone watching me. Looking up at the mirror, my eyes met Claire Cheen's. She looked startled. "You're the..." she began, then trailed off. My heart gave a nervous jolt. I met her gaze in the mirror, feigning ignorance. "Have we met?" She hesitated, then offered a slightly awkward smile. "Oh, sorry. I must have mistaken you for someone else." As she walked away, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then the implication hit me. Claire wouldn't be backstage at a swim meet without a reason. I stepped out of the restroom just in time to see her disappear into a nearby changing room. Curiosity piqued, I walked closer. Taped to the door was a simple sheet of paper, black letters on white. Julian Ashworth. Julian called me when I was already halfway home. He heard the street noise in the background and fell silent on his end of the line. After a moment of heavy silence from him, I started babbling. I was totally going to come, but the confirmation call ran late, and by the time I got there it was already over. So you didn't come? His voice was flat. I couldn't explain why I was lying, why the sight of Claire entering his room had sent me fleeing. I deflected. Isn't it being broadcast on the local channel or something? The response was the dial tone. He'd hung up. I didn't need a TV broadcast. A quick search online revealed Julian Ashworth was trending. Apparently, his combination of good looks and athletic prowess had unexpectedly catapulted him into minor internet fame overnight. That's how I found out he'd actually placed second in his heat. A fantastic result for an amateur swimmer. He'd always been naturally athletic. A pang of guilt hit me. I had been there, physically present at the venue, yet I'd been so preoccupied with my own flustered reaction to him that I hadn't even noticed his achievement. I spent the next hour clicking through videos, watching replays of the race I'd missed. He was impressive. Smooth strokes, powerful kicks, incredible endurance. He moved through the water like a fish, closing the gap with the leader in the final stretch. The margin between first and second was tiny. Watching him, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, a vicarious thrill. It felt like I was finally seeing something I'd missed years ago. I remembered the summer after high school graduation. It was scorching hot, and Julian practically lived at the local swimming pool. He saw a flyer for a local competition tacked to the bulletin board and signed up on a whim. Whether through sheer luck or natural talent, he'd actually qualified for the regional finals. Unfortunately, there were no viral videos back then, and I hadn't been able to go watch him compete. My parents were in the middle of a messy divorce and my world felt like it was imploding. I couldn't leave the house, let alone attend a swim meet. He'd won second place in that preliminary round too, easily qualifying for the finals. But then he dropped out. He withdrew from the competition. When I asked him why, he just shrugged and said, "It was boring." But I knew better. He'd given it up for me. Competing seriously would have required intense training, hours he wouldn't have been able to spend making sure I wasn't completely falling apart at home amidst the parental wreckage. How could it have been boring? If joining was random, winning, achieving something would have ignited his competitive spirit. He wouldn't quit something he was good at unless there was a stronger reason. He quit because he knew I needed my best friend. I tried to convince him to reconsider, to talk to the organizers. He refused, ruffling my hair affectionately, forcing my head onto his shoulder as we sat on the porch swing. "Ow!" I yelped. He ignored me, messing up my hair even more. "Basketball already takes up enough of my time," he'd grumbled. "You want me to add serious swimming training on top of that? Trying to kill me. I just thought you were good at everything." I mumbled into his t-shirt. "You really think I'm Superman?" He released me, leaning back on the swing, hands clasped behind his head. "I know my limits, Elle. My swimming is okay for around here, maybe. But city level? Nationals? I just embarrass myself." I knew he was making excuses, but I still felt a pang of regret for him. I sat beside him, fiddling with a loose thread on my shorts. He watched me for a moment, then fished an orange-colored candy out of his pocket and handed it to me. "Stop thinking about it." I took the candy. After a while, I unwrapped it and popped it into my mouth. The sweet, tangy flavor of orange filled my senses. And in that quiet moment, during that difficult summer, I realized something profound. Liking someone, it tasted like orange candy. Since there was supposed to be a celebratory dinner for the swim team, I assumed Julian would be home late. Just as the sun began to set, I was stirring a pot of instant noodles for myself. Dinner for one. The key turned in the lock and Julian walked in. He was dressed casually in a t-shirt and shorts. As I looked at him, my mind played a trick, momentarily superimposing the image from the afternoon, him clad only in swim trunks. I quickly shook my head, forcing myself back to reality. "You're back early?" He seemed to be in a good mood, completely ignoring the fact that he'd hung up on me earlier. "It's my house," he stated, tossing his keys onto the counter. He rubbed his stomach as he approached the stove, the movement causing his t-shirt to ride up slightly, revealing the faint lines of his abs. "Just eating instant noodles?" My brain was definitely malfunctioning. I forced myself to look away, focusing intently on blowing on my steaming noodles. I thought you'd be eating out. Someone didn't show up, he said pointedly. A wave of guilt washed over me. It was your celebration. What does it have to do with me? Any more noodles? He asked, ignoring my question. Yeah, I can make you some. Can you finish that whole pot? Oh, right. For some reason, perhaps feeling subconsciously pathetic, I'd cooked 2 packets of noodles and loaded them up with ham, egg, and bok choy. A deluxe version of lonely dinner. Julian reached into the cupboard, grabbed a bowl and started serving himself from my pot. I automatically picked up the ladle to give him some broth. As I scooped, I tried to sound casual. Got the official job offer today. Start next Monday. Probation period? 2 months. Can get permanent earlier if I do well. Salary. I told him the figure, which also included potential stock options. He nodded. Not bad. I agreed, but my mind drifted back to seeing Claire backstage. The noodle soup suddenly lost its appeal. I poked listlessly at a piece of ham. Listen, I began hesitantly. Once I get my first paycheck, I should probably start looking for my own place. If it's not too much trouble, maybe you could help me look. He'd found my last apartment, securing a great deal in a good location back when I still had my government job. Julian ate silently, finishing his portion. Seeing my bowl largely untouched, he reached over and scooped more noodles from my bowl into his. The new company isn't far from here, he said matter-of-factly. Moving back and forth seems like a hassle. It's not that, I mumbled. It's just us living together. I mean, it might be inconvenient for you. Eventually. How is it inconvenient? He lifted his gaze, meeting my eyes directly. I found I couldn't hold his stare. My gaze skittered away. My voice dropped. Winter's coming, I said, grasping for an excuse. If I have to keep pretending to be a delivery person, I might catch a cold. Oh. I could hear the distinct pause in his chewing. The air thickened with unspoken tension. After a long moment, he let out a soft chuckle, breaking the silence. What's so funny? I asked warily. Claire mentioned, he said, his voice deceptively light, that you were at the competition venue today. Oh. And that you came backstage looking for me. Oh. You were clearly there. So why did you lie? Oh. Was it because of Claire? His questions came rapid-fire, leaving me no room to interject. Even a simple no felt feeble and untrue. I took a deep breath. I was afraid she'd misunderstand, I finally managed. In my memory, their college relationship had seemed significant. Claire, the team assistant, her crush on Julian obvious to everyone. It felt like they were always just one step away from being official. But ultimately, nothing happened. I never knew the full story. After that period, Julian rarely mentioned her. Seeing her at his apartment, then backstage. It felt like a loose end being tied up, a story resuming. Whether it was a rekindled flame or a second chance, I told myself I wasn't interested. Julian pressed further. Afraid she'd misunderstand what? Our relationship. And what relationship is that, Eleanor? Oh. The relationship where we slept together, but are pretending nothing happened while living under the same roof? Seeing me speechless, Julian's expression softened slightly. He gently pushed his empty bowl aside, then reached across the small table and carefully pried the chopsticks from my tense fingers. He unfolded my stiff, cold hand and enclosed it firmly in his warm one. I couldn't pull away. Eleanor, he said softly, his eyes holding mine, you weren't afraid she'd misunderstand. You were jealous. I am admittedly pathetic. Twice now, I've felt the green-eyed monster rear its ugly head, and both times, it was because of the same underlying insecurity. A long time ago, someone asked Julian about his ideal type. I was standing right beside him. His answer was swift and decisive. Long hair, innocent, ladylike. Everything I wasn't. The complete opposite of my tomboyish persona. The people around us erupted in knowing chuckles, glancing pointedly between him and me. I tried to play it cool, punching his arm playfully, forcing a laugh. Are you doing that on purpose? But inside, a sharp pang of hurt resonated. I suddenly felt a flicker of resentment towards him. Even back then, before I consciously acknowledged any romantic feelings, I was still a girl. His words, however unintentional, felt like a public dismissal, highlighting everything I lacked. It made me feel exposed and inadequate. I wanted to ignore him for days. But then my attention shifted to the senior basketball player, and the sting faded. I didn't dwell on Julian's words. Little did I know that my own affections would eventually pivot, shifting from the distant senior to the boy standing right next to me, during that pivotal summer after graduation. And then I had to care. I started growing my hair out. In college, though we were in the same city, we attended different universities. I deliberately avoided seeing him for over a month, planning a grand reveal. The day we finally met up, I wore a dress, a flowy floral thing completely unlike my usual jeans and t-shirts. From across the campus green, I heard his exaggerated laughter before I even reached him. "Aren't you cold?" he teased, flicking at the puffy sleeve of my dress. "This looks really weird on you. And your hair's gotten so long. It just doesn't seem right." I was speechless, momentarily stunned by his bluntness. "None of your business," I finally snapped, gritting my teeth. "Why isn't it my business?" he retorted, his teasing tone fading. "Who else do you have around here besides me?" He paused, his smile vanishing completely, replaced by a serious, searching look. "Eleanor, do you like someone new?" My heart leaped into my throat. Had he guessed? My palms instantly grew damp. But then his tone turned sharp, almost accusatory. "Don't change yourself for someone else. This just isn't you." The budding hope inside me withered. I asked quietly, "Does it look bad?" He didn't answer directly, his expression still stubbornly grumpy. I could read his silence, though. He clearly didn't like it. Just as I was about to say something, a girl walked past, calling out a cheerful greeting to him. She had long flowing hair, wore a pretty sundress, and had eyes that crinkled into crescents when she smiled. She was lovely. Julian gave her a curt nod, a dismissive acknowledgement. "Who was that?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "Someone from my department. Same year." "She likes you, doesn't she?" It was obvious. So many girls liked him. But seeing this one, remembering his supposed ideal type, I realized she fit the description perfectly. A surge of undeniable anxiety coursed through me. He scoffed. "Of course. I'm irresistible. She seems really pretty?" I ventured cautiously. "Compared to who?" "Compared to me, she definitely loses." Classic Julian arrogance. He was always ridiculously confident, whether it was about his looks or his basketball skills. Always attempting flashy, no-look shots, proclaiming, "Real men don't need to watch it go in." But for him to offer even faint praise like "seems pretty" was rare. Usually, his vanity allowed no rivals. Before, I wouldn't have cared. Now, I didn't dare ask him how I compared. I glanced back. The girl was just a receding figure down the path. Later, I learned her name was Claire. Julian always just called her Claire. I fled Julian's apartment, walking blindly for what felt like miles before I looked down and realized I was still wearing my fluffy house slippers. My phone was back on the kitchen table. My pockets yielded only 3 dull coins. Enough for something small. I found myself standing in front of a street vendor skillfully spinning molten sugar into delicate shapes. The intricate designs were beyond my meager funds. "Just a moon, please," I requested. As I watched the vendor expertly stretch and shape the gleaming sugar, Julian's words echoed in my ears. "You were jealous." And then the confession that followed, delivered with unnerving gentleness after he'd cornered me emotionally. "Eleanor, I like you. I've liked you for a long, long time. Since we were kids, probably. And even now. I still like you." Sitting across from him at the kitchen table, seeing the raw sincerity in his eyes, the dawning realization that he wasn't teasing, wasn't playing games, it sent me into a full-blown panic. I ran. Literally ran out the door. And now here I was replaying the scene, goosebumps prickling my arms despite the cool night air. Julian said he liked me. But how could he possibly like me? I hugged myself, shivering slightly, and noticed my elongated shadow stretching out before me on the pavement. Another shadow detached itself from the lamppost nearby. Julian. He was following me, keeping a careful distance. We looked at each other across the 10 meters of empty sidewalk. Even bathed in the cool, uncertain moonlight, he was undeniably handsome. He had every right to be confident. For so long, his presence was just a given, a constant fixture in my life. I'd taken him for granted, overlooked the quiet intensity beneath the easy charm. It wasn't until later, much later, that I'd started to notice the warmth in his hand when it brushed mine, the way his gaze sometimes lingered. That was when the first tentative seeds of something more than friendship had been sown. But proximity doesn't guarantee romance. Sometimes it breeds fear. Fear of losing the precious foundation you already have. Being too close means being afraid to take that final step forward. I'd understood that implicitly the moment Claire re-entered the picture. So what now? What was I supposed to do? The vendor handed me the delicate crescent moon sugar sculpture. Tucking it carefully into my hand, I shuffled towards Julian in my ridiculous slippers, my toes constantly trying to escape out the front. Seeing my struggle, a small smile touched Julian's lips. Is it funny? I demanded, trying to sound stern. He immediately schooled his features into seriousness, shaking his head. Then he produced a plastic bag from behind his back and pulled out a pair of shoes. Put these on, he said. They were black canvas sneakers. As he placed them on the ground in front of me, we both froze. Seriously? I deadpanned. Couldn't you have looked before grabbing them? These are huge. How am I supposed to wear these? They were his shoes. I had an identical pair, but these were clearly several sizes too big. Julian rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly, crouching down to look up at me. I was afraid I wouldn't catch you, he admitted. Didn't check the size. So now what? Think you can manage? Exasperated, I handed him the sugar moon for safekeeping and shoved my feet into the sneakers. They felt like boats, cavernous and loose. It was Julian who ended up practically carrying me over to a nearby stone bench, his arm steady around my waist. He offered the sugar moon back to me. I didn't take it. Isn't that your favorite flavor? I asked, remembering his childhood obsession. He looked almost comically grateful, clearly trying to curry favor. You bought this for me? I bought it because I had nothing better to do, I grumbled. And they don't give refunds. Still counts as buying it for me, he insisted, a hopeful glint in his eyes. Have some shame, Julian. He twirled the sugar stick thoughtfully. Can't afford to have shame tonight. His earnestness sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. Are you messing with me? I asked suspiciously. Is this revenge for me pretending I blacked out? Julian's expression turned serious. Why would I ever joke about something like this, Eleanor? Then why? Why do you like me? Does it need a reason? Yes. He looked at me intently. Is I only see you a good enough reason? Since we were kids, it's only ever been you. Oh. I clenched my fists, turning my head away. Can you please talk normally? That is me talking normally. From the heart. Fine. When did you start liking me? When did I not like you? I've always liked you. Okay, if you keep talking like that, this conversation is over. Julian sighed, running a hand over his face in frustration. Seriously? I can't even tell the truth. It's just, I never heard you say any of this before. I retorted. If you don't say it, how am I supposed to know? Could I say it? He sounded genuinely aggrieved now. You were always talking about wanting a boyfriend, totally oblivious to the giant guy standing right in front of you, crushing on every random idiot that crossed your path. And then all our friends constantly teased us about getting together, right? And what was your reaction? Impossible. Never. Always shutting it down. Tell me, Eleanor, in that situation, how could I possibly confess? We would have imploded years ago. He mimicked my emphatic impossible. Impossible. Declarations, waving his hands dramatically. It was almost funny. I suppressed a smile. Okay, maybe we were too close. Wait. You liked me even that early? Were you even listening just now? Did you think I was just making noise? Oh. My emotional intelligence had clearly been operating on a significant delay. He was right about everything he just said. Back then I hadn't seen him that way. If he had confessed in high school, I probably would have freaked out and run screaming. Liking him romantically came much later. But there was one point I needed to clarify. For the record, I stated firmly, I only ever seriously crushed on 2 guys. And one of them was barely a crush before you brutally extinguished the flame. Don't lie. There were tons. Do you seriously think every single guy I ever mentioned by name was someone I had a crush on? Basically, yeah, he declared, utterly convinced. Oh. His logic was baffling. But then his voice dropped again, laced with a familiar insecurity. You crushed on all those guys. But never me. Even after we slept together, you still wanted to pretend it didn't happen. My heart softened, conveniently ignoring the last part of his sentence. Julian, I said gently, using your logic. If every guy I mentioned was a crush, have you ever stopped to think about which guy's name I've mentioned most often in front of you my entire life? Julian, usually so quick-witted, seemed stumped. Who? He frowned. Wait. You said you crushed on 2 guys. I caught you red-handed with one. Who was the other? That ugly guy you used to talk about? Or some other loser I missed? Who? I sighed dramatically. The ugly guy, I said, meeting his confused gaze, was you. Julian froze, his eyes widening slightly. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Looking at his stunned expression, I felt an unexpected urge to laugh, but a stinging sensation behind my eyes came first. Julian Ashworth, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I had a crush on you too. It was just a secret crush buried deep, never seeing the light of day. Easily covered over, forgotten as if it never existed. After learning about Claire Chin in college, hearing how she'd joined the basketball team staff just to be near Julian, how she was present at every team dinner, how everyone called her Claire so familiarly, including Julian himself when he mentioned her to me. A bitter, acidic feeling churned in my stomach. So when Julian asked me what my supposed new crush looked like, I described him bitterly. An ugly guy. Really annoying. Seriously? And you like that? He'd scoffed. Yeah, I'd replied flatly. I must be blind. He'd fallen silent after that. Our video calls during that period often ended abruptly, fizzling out in uncomfortable silence. We were locked in a strange, unspoken competition. He'd talk about his Claire. I'd talk about my ugly guy. Neither willing to back down. It continued until I heard a rumor that Claire was planning to confess her feelings to him on Valentine's Day. Suddenly, the pointless rivalry felt exhausting, childish. That's when the Cold War truly began. No arguments, no blow-ups. Just a sudden, quiet cessation of communication. It lasted an entire semester. The next time I saw him was during winter break. We bumped into each other unexpectedly on the train platform back home. No prior arrangement, just pure coincidence. And just like that, as quickly and quietly as it began, the Cold War ended. We slipped back into our old rhythm as if nothing had happened. Perhaps that was the strange magic of a bond forged in childhood. He never mentioned Claire again. I never mentioned my ugly guy again. Being friends was safer. Better than lovers, surely. So, Julian finally processed, his voice rough. The ugly guy you kept talking about. That was really me? Enough time had passed. The old hurts had faded. Yes, I confirmed. I grew my hair out for you. Wore dresses for you. And all you did was make fun of me. That's because I thought you were doing it for some other jerk. He protested vehemently. Well, I conceded dryly. You were definitely a jerk. Damn it. He scrubbed his face vigorously with both hands, then turned back to me, the corners of his eyes suspiciously red. The half-melted sugar. Moon sat forgotten, wedged in a crack in the stone bench. Eleanor, he mumbled, his voice thick. Right now I feel like the world's biggest idiot. The September night air was growing cool. After sitting in silence for a while longer, I wanted to go back. Because of the ill-fitting shoes, Julian held my hand tightly as we walked slowly back towards the apartment building. Passing the little garden pavilion where this whole evening's drama began, I glanced towards it. Julian noticed. About Claire showing up that day. He began tentatively. Are you still curious? I pursed my lips. Say what you want. Okay, he took a breath. Back in college, less than 2 months after Claire joined the team staff, she started dating Mikey. Mikey. I remembered Mikey, tall guy, even taller than Julian, tan skin, dazzlingly white smile. Yeah, Mikey asked her out. So, realization dawned. You were lying to me back then too. About her supposedly liking him. I tried to pull my hand away, but Julian held on tighter. Hey, I only said that because hearing you talk about that ugly guy was driving me crazy. I didn't respond. He continued. Claire came over the other day mostly to network. Her company wants to collaborate with mine. But there's a lot of competition. You're saying she was just trying to use her connection to you? Sort of. Honestly, I hadn't spoken to her in ages. We ran into each other at a conference recently, but I was surprised she showed up at my door. She knew your address. How were you surprised? Mikey gave it to her. They're still together? Is that weird? They got engaged early this year. Oh, Julian added quickly. Look, I can't say for sure if she doesn't still have some lingering what-ifs about me. I mean, after all, I am incredibly charming. I rolled my eyes. He grinned. But the only thing I am sure about is that I don't have feelings for her. Or anyone else. His grin faded slightly. Except you, obviously. He hadn't always been this smooth-talking. Felt strange. Annoyed, I stopped listening intently but couldn't resist asking one more thing. How did Claire recognize me? Besides the watermelon incident, we never formally met, did we? My phone lock screen in college was a picture of you, he admitted sheepishly. She was the team assistant. She collected our phones before practice all the time. Hard for her not to see it. Why would you use my picture as your lock screen? Are you crazy? How else was I supposed to get her to back off? He countered logically. Oh. Besides, he added, after you did your delivery girl routine and vanished with the watermelon, she asked me about you. Asked what? Asked if you were Eleanor. My face flushed hot. And you didn't tell me? Telling you now, aren't I? Is she more important than me? There it was again. That unwavering self-confidence. By then we'd reached his apartment door. With everything out in the open, only one final question remained, hanging heavy in the air between us. You know, Julian said quietly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles, I never said anything before because I honestly didn't think you liked me back. So, the great Julian Ashworth has moments of insecurity after all. Only with you, he admitted, his voice low. With you it's always been bravado. So if I'd stayed backstage today, if I hadn't lied, hadn't gotten jealous, would you still be keeping quiet? Probably. Infuriated, I aimed a kick at his shin, but my oversized shoe flew off my foot instead, sailing through the entryway and landing halfway across the living room. Julian jumped, startled, but instinctively tightened his grip on my hand. We're home now, I said pointedly. You can let go. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before releasing my hand. A faint indentation remained on my skin from where his pinky ring had pressed. I'd given him that ring for his birthday last year. He'd picked it out himself. I remembered that day. We were chatting on his balcony. He slipped the new ring onto his finger, looking at me with a teasing glint in his eyes. Eleanor, he'd said, half joking, half serious, if we're both still single when we turn 30, let's just give up and marry each other, okay? Okay, I'd agreed easily back then. But tonight Julian was breaking the pact. The moment he let go of my hand, before I could even register the lack of contact, he pulled me into a sudden fierce hug. Even at my not insignificant height, I felt dwarfed by his embrace. His breath warmed my ear. Almost involuntarily, my arms wrapped around his back, holding him just as tightly. Eleanor, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion against my hair. I can't wait until 30. Julian led me to his study. Since moving in, I hadn't ventured into his workspace. He sat down at his computer, clicked open folder after folder, revealing file after neatly labeled file. I realized with a jolt what he was about to show me. His diaries. The ones he'd guarded so fiercely for all these years. Seriously, who keeps a diary? The thought flitted through my mind again, but this time with tenderness. Maybe he'd been waiting for this day for a very long time. My eyes burned as I started to read, because his diaries, they were all about me, filled with years of observations, frustrations, and hidden affections. I never knew I possessed so many cute quirks in his eyes, even though he also called me a pig repeatedly throughout the entries. The files were organized by year. I scrolled slowly, finally reaching the entry from that fateful day in high school, the one he'd been so desperate to hide. It was about jealousy. Pure, unadulterated jealousy. Because he hated that I was taking pictures of someone else. Hated even more that while he was shining in his element on the basketball court, my eyes were fixed elsewhere. I must have been reading for nearly an hour when Julian, who had been sitting quietly on the floor behind my chair, shifted slightly. Automatically started to get up, but he wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me back down onto his lap, preventing me from moving. Aren't your legs numb? I asked, surprised. You're not heavy, he murmured against my back. Okay, but I should probably get up anyway. He tightened his hold, refusing to let go. Finished reading? He asked, his voice muffled. What do you think? I couldn't speak. If I did, I knew I'd cry, and that felt far too vulnerable. So I deflected. Why do the diaries stop sophomore year of college? Because we had that fight, he answered simply. My nose stung. Are you an idiot? I whispered. If I am, then we're a perfect match, he retorted softly. Later that night, Julian didn't go back to his own bedroom. Lying beside me in the darkness, he asked quietly, Eleanor, does this time count? I became a stubborn clam, refusing to answer, burying my face in the pillow. But he didn't seem rushed. He simply traced a pattern on my bare leg with his finger, finding the small birthmark on my outer thigh. Even in the pitch black, he knew exactly where it was. Eleanor, he murmured, his touch sending shivers down my spine. This one here. It's shaped like a heart. I covered my burning face with my hands, overwhelmed, tears finally threatening to spill. Please, I choked out, half laughing, half crying. Just shut up. And,